Sports Take on this Tuesday as we get you set for the NFL draft, which is upcoming. We thought who better to talk to than Dave Zangaro of NBC Sports Philadelphia. You can follow him on Twitter at @DZangaro NBCS. Also has a great podcast, the Eagle Eye Podcast, with our friend Ruben Frank. What's up, Dave? How you doing, man?
What's up, guys? How are you?
Good, my brother.
Are we in the podcast booth? Is that where we are right now, Dave?
Yeah, we're recording in a little bit, so I'm already in the office, and I'm doing the show with Barrett tonight. So I'm locked.
The whole show, yes.
Okay.
He's co-hosting with me the whole show.
Just
Dave, don't put up with this mess. Don't put up with this mess, Dave.
Now, is it just the two of you?
No, Ames is with us too.
Okay.
Yeah, Amy has to play referee.
I was going to say, that could get interesting. All right. So, Dave, let's start with this. Your gut. I want your gut. What's your gut telling you with 10 and 30? Move up, move down, stay pat? What are you thinking?
Stay pat, no. I mean, it's just not what Howie does. I think the trade up and trade down scenarios kind of work hand in hand because you don't know what the board is going to look like before they pick. I think there's a good chance that one of those top defensive players falls into their range, and really the two that I have my eye on, because I think Will Anderson is going to be long gone, right? So the two that I have my eye on are Jalen Carter and Tyree Wilson. If one of those guys slips into their range, I think Howie has the draft capital to say, all right, I can trade up to get these players. We've seen them the last 2 years. I mean, first the Devontae year, there was a trade down and then a trade up, but on draft day, trade ups to get Devontae Smith, to get Jordan Davis. We've seen them do it before with Andre Dillard. Like they are aggressive when there's a player out there they want. And I think those two players fit the bill of, really good players who, in my opinion, are a couple of the best in this entire draft at positions that prioritize, positions you can say they need. So I could see a trade up. Now, but you also need someone willing to trade out of that spot. And if that doesn't happen, there's a chance there could be someone there at 10 that's worthy. But then I think you might get into like the second tier. And if there's 5 guys and you can trade back 3 spots, you do it, and that's kind of the way they look at this whole thing.
So Dave, whether you have the Eagles standing pat, moving up, moving down, as you've looked at your mock drafts, how many different players have you associated the Eagles with in terms of who they could pick in that first round with their first pick?
A lot. And I think some of it is like, look, as much fun as we have talking about Bijan Robinson, I think we all kind of agree that it's unlikely, right? Based on their history. It doesn't mean that it's completely out of the question, but if you're trying to handicap this, you say, well, what do they value? What do they do? The positions they typically draft in the first round are offensive or defensive line, predominantly defensive line. That's the way they've gone more often than not. And then wide receiver. And I think wide receiver is unlikely given what they have already in the building. So now you go, okay, is it offensive or defensive line? And they've drafted more defensive linemen for a reason. And those defensive linemen, the nice thing about them is they play immediately. Whereas you draft an offensive lineman, maybe it'll tell us what they think of Cam Jurgens, right? Like he's right now slated to start at right guard. If they draft Skoronski or Johnson, guess what? They got to play. So now you're playing them at right guard. And I do think offensive line is a need. I think they need to replenish that depth. I don't know if they do it in the first round.
Yeah, that's the problem. At this point, it's either 10, which is really, really high, or 30 is just too low. So they're in an unenvious position that if you wanted to get the top 2, either Carter or Williams, you have to give both of those picks to get them. Are they worth it? I think Carter is. I think Williams is. They're
I don't know if you
worth
have to give up 30 necessarily, depending on how high up you go.
You have to go. You have to at least get to 3 or 4. Wouldn't you say?
Maybe not to get one of the Look, so I think there's a really good chance. Well, obviously, quarterbacks go 1, 2, right?
Yeah, right.
3 is
going to be Will Anderson. If you want to get Will Anderson, I think you're going to have to get the 3. Don't you think, Dave?
3 probably, unless they're fielding offers for that third pick.
True.
If they trade out, that's a quarterback. You're not trading a ton to move up to get a defensive player unless he's like the second coming. And Will Anderson's a really good player. He's not like an all-time prospect, right? And you
they're saying William is the next Derek Thomas.
Well, I don't know if I see that. I think like you have to be really sure if you're moving up to 3 to get a defensive player. If you're moving up to get a quarterback, that makes more sense. So if they trade out of there, you could have 3 quarterbacks in the top 3 picks.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of a free-for-all.
Well, you're right.
And if it's not the Colts to move up to 3, that means another team probably moves up to 3 to draft the quarterback they think the Colts might take. Then do the Colts take the 4th quarterback, whether it's
Levis or Richardson? Yeah, whatever. I think if you're the Eagles, you're like, go ahead, guys, go nuts
for it. If you're Howie, you're like, man, this quarterback class is incredible.
It's the greatest.
We needed a quarterback this year. You try to talk them up and get those 4 guys off the board. And then, if they're not in on the offensive tackles, and look, I don't think they should be, there could be some teams trying to move up for those guys because there aren't a ton of them that are worthy of a high first-round pick. And that could be a team trying to get in that 10 range and get the Eagles pick if they don't move up.
6 of 9 teams in front of the Eagles, if the front 10 stayed exactly the way it is, which I don't think it will, 6 of those 9 teams easily can use defensive players when you look at where they're drafted. The other 3 are quarterbacks. So if Howie, you're right, if Howie does have one player in particular identified that he wants, it's imperative he tries to move up. The only problem, he doesn't have the draft capital like he normally does to do something like that.
You have it next year. You can trade next year.
Yeah, that's what I said yesterday. That's the only way he can make this thing work.
They have 8 picks next year already.
Yeah. They're going to have about 15.
Comp picks.
That's where it's coming from.
Get more than, I think they're going to get more than 4, to be honest with you.
Well, they can't. Not for players. That it's capped at 4.
Oh, it is capped at 4.
It's capped at 4. So, but that's 12 picks next year. This roster is too good. You can't draft 12 players. They won't fit on the team. So, I think that, and look, you can't trade the compensatory picks until you have them.
Right.
But you can trade your other picks knowing that the comp picks are coming, and they know the comp picks are coming. So I think they still have some flexibility, and Howie's not going to sit on his hands. He just doesn't do that. And I respect that about him because I think that, and I've said this a million times, anyone who's ever heard me talk about the draft hears me say this, but Howie's so good at maximizing value in the draft. It's one thing to just try to draft the best players. Every team does that. So the Eagles are always looking for ways to separate themselves. And the way they do it, or at least the way they try to do it and often achieve it in the draft, is by maximizing the value. And the way you do that is you move up and down the board and you try to get value. There's that great story from one of the Chip Kelly drafts about, I think it was Taylor Hart. And what was that? I think that was 2013 or 2014 when Chip was here, but Howie was in charge. And Chip wanted to draft Taylor Hart in like the 3rd round. And Howie said, yeah, we'll get him. Not now. We'll get him late. And I think he has a really good understanding with his staff of how other teams are lining up their boards and then the way to strike from a value perspective.
Howie's method to his madness is murder on us who have to do these pre-draft shows, especially when they start sliding down. You anticipate we got something to talk about and it's gone. Now I don't think he'll trade that 30th pick. I think there's some value there. But, again, because it's Howie, if he can garner some middle-round picks somehow, some way, he's going to do it because he loves his middle-round picks. He's going to do it. And we're going to be sitting there all night with virtually little to talk about based on the Eagles because of Howie's wheelings and dealings.
Well, and look, that 30th pick, I think that is open for trade because, especially if say the 4 quarterbacks are gone and then the 5th quarterback is out there. If a team wants to move up, there's real value for them if they think they're going to get their quarterback and getting him in the 1st round, because then you get that 5th-year option. So you get an extra year of control, which matters at a lot of positions, but really quarterback. I mean, that's where it matters. And we saw that in 2018 when they were sitting there at 32 after winning the Super Bowl, and the Ravens came calling because they wanted Lamar Jackson. They were willing to give up a pretty hefty package to get back into the 1st round and draft their quarterback. So if the quarterback is out there, whoever it is, and a team wants to move up, then the Eagles should listen to that, and they can move back. And they're so willing to. That's the fun thing about Howie. We've seen him so many times. Like, he'll move down and up and down. Like, even in 2018, he moved down from 32, I think, to like 52, something in there. And then he moved back up to 49 to draft Dallas Goedert. So it's not even like once he makes a trade, he's done, and he can just, oh, now we got to sit here and watch all these picks come off. He can find ways to get back up too. And he's always working the phones. And a lot of this is already like done, right? Like, he's already talked to teams about the value it'll take, or like, what's it going to take to move up from 10 to 7 or 10 to 8, because there's not enough time to do that on draft night. So he goes through it. He talks to all those GMs, and he has kind of the layout of all those trades already done by the time that Thursday night rolls around.
Where do you stand on Bijan, David? There's been a lot of discussion of late. Clearly, it hasn't been their track record to even think about this in the first round, but he is an exceptional player. What are the odds, and what do you think they may end up doing there? Is that an absolute no-go in your estimation?
Look, I like the player. I think he's a great player. He's the best running back in the draft. He's probably a top 10 player in this draft. I don't think they're going to do it. And not at 10. If he's there at 30, which he won't be, then I think it changes things. The difference, when we talk about the first round, I mean, the difference between the 10th pick and the 30th pick is astronomical, right? So I agree with them. Like, I don't think it's a good use of resources to draft a running back with the 10th pick, given the shelf life, given the injury history of running backs. And it's tempting. It's absolutely tempting, because like, how good could this offense be with a premier running back like that?
Well, let me ask you this then. In looking at our roster and the way it's constructed right now, it's almost as though it wouldn't make much sense for us to have a lot of draft picks anyways, because this roster is pretty filled. The draft picks that they had last year, over half of them were on the practice squad last year. You look at this year, it's probably be the same thing. There are so many good players that are on those starters right now that it's hard to find room for guys to be on this roster. So who would you put at number 10? Where would you likely go at number 10, considering the way this roster is put together?
Yeah, look, I think, the players you draft in day 1 and day 2 are going to be on the team. It's about, those 6th round picks, and who knows about whether or not those guys stick. Last year, we saw the Eagles, even though you're right about the draft picks, two or three undrafted guys made the team. So there's still opportunity. I think defensive line makes sense in the first round, because I think they need to replenish there. I think they're getting older there, and those guys are going to play. It's a tougher pill to swallow if you draft an offensive lineman and you're looking at this starting lineup going, well, there's not a spot for him. And if there is, it takes it away from your 2nd round pick last year. I mean, that's not that. It might work. You might get the best player, but I think the offensive lineman would need to be such a better, that player would need to be that much better than the next other position to draft him. Whereas defensive line, whether it's take your pick of the guy, whether it's the edge like Van Ness or Miles Murphy or Nolan Smith, like one of those guys, they'll play. They'll play immediately. Or if it's defensive tackle, take your pick there, whether it's Jalen Carter or Brazee or Clancy. Pick one of those guys, and they'll play. They'll play immediately, and they're not going to start, but that's okay.
Dave, are you a believer in Jordan Davis? Did you see enough to know one way or the other, or are you on the fence? And I got to see what this looks like this year with him healthy, with a greater increased role here.
Yeah, look, I'm not ready to say he's going to be a Pro Bowler, but I saw enough good things last year to be encouraged. It was a shame for him when he got hurt, because the moment he got hurt, I felt like he was just starting to get it. He was just starting to look like the guy they drafted in the first round. I think that was his 5th start in a row when he got that high ankle sprain against the Steelers. And in that game, it was funny. In that particular game was the first time they played him not at the nose tackle spot. They played him off the center, which I think is a really important part of his development, because they didn't draft this guy just to be a run stuffing nose tackle. Like that was the absolute base of what he can do. And we knew he could do that. We know he can stuff the run. We know he can 2-gap. That's fine. But they drafted him on his athletic upside and being able to penetrate. And I felt like we didn't get to see that last year, but we were about to. I really thought like we were about to see that, really starting with that Pittsburgh game, and then he got the high ankle, and I don't. Maybe at the end of the year he started to look a little better, but even when he got back from the injury, he tweaked it again. It didn't look right. That's a tough injury, the high ankle sprain for a guy who's 340 pounds to get over, and it took him a long time. And then they brought in Linval Joseph, and so you got him behind Linval. But by the end of the year, I thought Jordan Davis started to look better again, and he was starting to take some of the snaps from Linval away. But that's the next level for him, is seeing him not just be a first and second down run stuffing defensive tackle, because that's good, and he can do that at an elite level, but that's not why they drafted him. They drafted him for more than that.
Hey, Dave, do you think Blankenship is ready for an expanded role, or do you think his niche is what it was, sporadic play?
It's a tough question. It's the same question they asked themselves about Marcus Epps 2 years ago. And look, I thought Marcus was at least a solid level starter. He proved him. He wasn't a great player last year, and maybe he wasn't as good in the full-time role as he was as a third safety playing rotationally, but thought he was fine. And I think I kind of think the same thing about Blankenship. I think he'd be an okay starter. And when you're constructing the roster, you have to be willing to be okay at some positions. Last year, I think spoiled us all a little bit because they were so good at like every position.
Right.
It was a roster, like it was the best roster I've ever covered, and they didn't have any weaknesses. I think they're probably going to have to get by with him at one of those starting spots, and we'll see if Terrell Edmonds is the other. I don't think they're done at that position. It's a bad year to need a safety in the draft. It's not a great safety draft, but there are guys. There are guys out there. I don't know if it'll be Branch in the first round, like some people think. But like even a guy like Branch is exciting because he can play the nickel a little bit. He can match up in coverage. The other thought out there is Avonte Maddox. Could he take some safety reps? We saw him do that last year a little bit. He'd play safety and base, move up to nickel in sub packages. I think he could handle that, but he's also getting paid like a nickel too. So at a certain point, he's going to say, wait a second here. I'm getting paid to do one job and you're making me do another. They have some options there. I don't think they're done at safety.
Okay.
Well, is linebacker the same way, Dave? Like just got to kind of live with sort of the uncertainty, I guess, of Nakobe Dean and Morrow coming over from the Bears. I guess that's what it looks like right now.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, that could be another position where they add in the draft, not the first round, probably. Sorry, Barrett. I think that there's a chance they add at linebacker, but you're right. It's like you can't have stars at every position. You just can't. That's the situation they're in right now, and that's why we saw the team kind of take all these lottery ticket type signings this offseason, guys. That if it works out, great. If it doesn't, you didn't waste any money. And that's really every signing they made this offseason except for Mariota, who they had to give outside signing. I'm saying they had to give a little bit of money to get a backup quarterback. But, yeah, I mean, like I don't know if any of those guys are going to work out. Is Morrow going to be a good player? I don't know. We'll eat some snaps for you, and you hope Nakobe Dean can play. It's kind of telling that the Bears went out and upgraded twice. They brought in two players instead of keeping Morrow, so it kind of tells you what they thought of him. But that's the situation you're in. You can't have a star at every position.
Well, we're done at the running back position for this year, don't you think?
Not necessarily. I could see a draft pick at some point. I could see an undrafted kid come in. It's tough to know what they're thinking at running back because Penny is a fun signing, and I really like the player. You can't rely on him. Like I don't even know if you can factor him into your decision making at that position because he can't stay on the field.
Say that one more time. Say that one more time. You can't factor him in your decision making because he's not healthy. Yeah, that's huge. That's huge right now.
Yeah, I mean, well, think of like it would be foolish for the Eagles to think it'd be hubris, right? If they thought, yeah, he's going to come here and all of a sudden be healthy. I think they're hoping for that, And if it works out, they'll look like geniuses because they gave the guy $600,000 in guaranteed money, and he has Pro Bowl potential, like legitimate Pro Bowl potential. He's a great player when he's on the field. He's not on the field ever. So then it comes down to what's their evaluation of Kenny Gainwell. Can Gainwell be a running back one?
I think he is the lead back right now.
I believe so.
Yeah, see, I'm not – I like Kenny Gainwell. I'm not sold on him being an RB1. I think he's better. And that's not a knock on him. I think he's better as a change of pace guy. I think he's better as a third down back. And I wonder if at a certain point, if you expand his role, if he can't deliver in the same way he did in that smaller role.
See, when I mentioned it several weeks ago that Gainwell was going to be their lead back, people automatically assume that means their number one back who's going to get 300 touches. No, in this Eagles offense, the lead back can change weekly. I think he's going to increase his touches significantly, both in the run and the pass combined, with Miles Sanders no longer in his way. But each week, it could be Penny one week, it could be Boston Scott one week. We still don't know what they think of Trey Sermon. You know, I think Trey Sermon is a good viable option. He just hasn't had the opportunities. But I do believe you could tell in the latter part of the season in the playoffs, they began to favor Gainwell. It was quite obvious. Now, does that mean they're building him up to be their lead back, not feature all the time, but lead back? I think there's a good possibility. But what is a lead back in the Eagles offense compared to Tennessee, Green Bay, Pittsburgh? You know what I mean? Teams like that.
I mean, Miles was that last year.
Yes, he was.
He certainly was. He had a lot of carries, and he played really well. I think Penny has that potential, but can't rely on it.
You're right. You're absolutely. What does he play? Only 39 games, Rob? You said
49. I think he's missed it
in his career.
Crazy, a lot.
His legs are fresh, Rob.
Good point, Dave. Glass half full. Of the departures, Dave, meaning Hargrave, CJ, GJ, Sanders, Edwards, Epps, whoever you want to throw in there, Sayamalo, who do you think they'll miss the most?
Hargrave. He's the best player of the bunch. I think sometimes we get cute with ourselves when we talk about these things and we go, oh, well, Hargrave was the best player. That's why he got $84 million on the open market. They're going to miss him. After him, I think it's CJ. He was the one guy I really thought they should prioritize. I think they tried to prioritize because he's so young. And all the other players that got signed away, and Hargrave included, you have to ask yourself, the end of a 3-year deal, are they going to be playing their best football? I don't know about Hargrave. He's going to be pretty old by the time CJ's going to be 28
right
at the end of his 3-year deal. So you can argue he's going to be playing his best football, and he's learning a new position still. So he's going to be playing his best football in the third year of the deal. And that's why I thought they should prioritize it. But if you're asking me next year, who are they going to miss most? Definitely Hargrave.
Well, all right, man. I mean, when I look at next year and how they're constructed, especially on the offensive side of the ball, where is the number 3 position, the number 3 wide receiver position? I'm not saying the number 3 weapon, we got, mixed up with yesterday. Not the number 3 weapon. We all know Dallas Scott is probably the number 3 as far as receivers. But the number 3 position, especially when they go 11 personnel, when they have 3 receivers on the field, do they pick somebody high to take, to fill that position, or are they out in free agent market to get that position filled?
I mean, I don't think they need to fill it. And I am on an island here in this city.
Oh, yes, you are. By yourself. You're just wading in the waves right now, because I don't think anybody right now thinks Quez could be that guy right now.
Well, let me ask you this. And I've had questions about, should they go sign Jarvis Landry? Well, yeah, maybe if they get Jarvis Landry on a really cheap deal, they bring him in. He's going to need targets. Who's he taking the targets away from? They're unapologetic about the way this offense runs, at least through the pass game, is through A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert. Those guys get their target share. After that, I'm not trying to get Quez super involved. And the thing I like about Quez in that role is that he can make an impact without needing a large percentage of that target share because of his speed. And I didn't like the way they used him last year. He ended up averaging 11 yards a catch last year, which is stupid because all the crap they did at the line of scrimmage with him didn't make any sense. but he still has that pure speed. He still has the big play potential. I think he has 5 catches of 40+ yards in the last few years. So
should have been
he has
20.
that.
He dropped me. I'm not gonna say 20, but he should have had 10 more, or at least 5 more that he should have gotten. He should have caught 5 more that he dropped. One that he just dropped it when he fumbled it. But come on, man, you get paid to take the top off the defense. You take it off, that means you got to catch it too.
Yeah, but he's proven he can catch it. He can track the ball. He has those catches under his belt. And the problem is, like, if you use a high pick on a receiver or you go sign a big name free agent, he's taken catches away from Devontae Smith and AJ Brown. I don't want that. I just don't want that. And I know AJ Brown and Devontae Smith don't want that. So that's the problem. Like, I think ideally Quez would just make those plays and you wouldn't have to worry about it. I think he has the capability to do that. And I just
he didn't do it in the second half of the season, though.
I agree with that. Which is why we're having the conversation at all.
Right.
But I like the idea of having someone with the capability of making an impact without needing the heavy target share. And that player doesn't really exist elsewhere. It's like if you use a first or second round pick on a receiver, you're playing him a ton.
Mm-hmm.
Let me throw something by you guys that
I like when the tables get turned. I like it, Dave. Yes.
I've been thinking about a little bit because you made sure to specifically say the third receiver position, Barrett, which I like that you did that because it can change. Because like if they need another guy to catch the football, is it crazy to think about adding a tight end in this tight end draft that is really good?
Nope,
not at all. But I think you have Cal Katera there, who's a pass catcher. They just used him as a blocker more so last year. They ran a lot more 11 person as opposed to 12 personnel, 1 running back, 2 tight ends. So I think that's the direction. We know that Jake Stahl, even though he did catch a couple at the end of the year, he's not the guy that's going to run and get open. I think Cal Katera it is, but when you look at those wide receivers, those tight ends out there, it makes you think now. The kid, even the huge kid, 6'7", 250 pounds from Georgia. Can you imagine him and Malata line
he
up
looks
on
like
one side?
A building. He looks like a building running down the field. If anybody's seen this guy, it's
so you got Dickerson, Malata, and that kid on the right side. You can block. You could take and drive people a country mile and not run back when you get touched if you drive them over there.
You know what? It's not crazy, Dave. It's not, man. Because let's face it. All due respect to Jack Stoll, you could find a lot of Jack Stolls. I think
and they like Jack Stoll. Jack Stoll does a good job,
fine.
but
he's fine.
If you can find a guy who like is a legitimate weapon at the tight end spot, and look, I like Dallas Goedert. He's under contract. He's a great player. Nothing's stopping them from drafting another tight end. They did it when Zach Ertz was in his prime.
Right. Last one. We've gotten this far, and we haven't asked you about Jalen Hurts. Are you hearing anything? Are there any sniffs, any whispers, any kind of movement here?
I think it'll happen eventually. I think it'll happen this offseason. That's all I know. I think both sides want to get it done, and when there's motivation on both sides to get it done, that's normally the way things go. It's going to be a massive deal. I think the years of the deal, as much as the guaranteed money, I think will matter. The Eagles will want more years. Jalen's going to want fewer, you would think, because he'll want a chance to go back to the negotiating table sooner, especially with all the expected new TV money coming through. So I think that could be a little bit of a sticking point. But it kind of feels like the whole league is just like waiting on Lamar, and then it's Jalen and Herbert and Burrow are also eligible. The difference with Herbert and Burrow are they have the 5th-year options on their contracts because they were first-round picks. So I think there's if I'm the Eagles, I think I'd prefer to get it done sooner because I'd like to beat those other two to the deal, right? Like if Herbert signs a deal, that kind of sets the floor. And I'd rather be the one setting the floor than the one that has to climb over it.
Yep. I love what they did for Wentz.
That makes sense. All right, Dave. So tonight, unfortunately, you have to deal with Barrett. I mean, it's
Poor
not gonna be-
man.
I mean, what? No, I'm kidding. So you
Not a
and
lot.
Barrett tonight and Amy on Birds Huddle. What time? Let the folks know when they can catch you.
6 p.m.
6 p.m. All right, perfect. All right, so we're looking forward to that. Dave, keep up the good work. NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com, and of course, your podcast with our buddy Rube, who does it. You guys two together do an awesome job covering the Eagles for the Eagle Eye podcast. So thanks, Dave. We appreciate you taking a couple.
Beers on you, Dave.
Appreciate you,
Beers
bro.
on you tonight, Dave.
Beers on you, Dave. Oh,
We'll see. Take care.
all right. See you, Dave. You throwing that at him after he agrees to be a guest? And you're buying the beers, Barrett. Come on, man. All right. We appreciate Dave hopping on for a couple minutes. All right.
Yeah. He says
I
some
was gonna
insightful stuff, man. You know, I mean,
Makes you think.
yeah, it definitely makes you think. You know,
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense.
I love the notion that Arizona's floating 3 to a quarterback hungry team. Like just the more teams in front of the Eagles that want offense, that want quarterbacks. You wish there were some stud receivers. This doesn't have the feel this year that some of the other years had with the really big time receivers. That could help the Eagles out even more, but not the case this year. They could. It's distinct possibility, man. One of those either D tackles, D edge guys, the top 2 D edges, Anderson and was it the Tyree kid out of Texas Tech.
Wilson.
Those two, Wilson, are both there. Or Jalen Carter. It's a very distinct possibility that at least they're going to be close, and it might not be that big a move up.
And they take an offensive lineman.
Yeah. Peter Skoronsky with the 10th overall pick.
People will be like, "What?"
The Eagles fans collectively lose their minds as soon as that
Oh
happens.
my goodness!
Absolutely.
It's great. All right, let's get a quickie in here. We'll come back. We'll mix in some Phillies in the 2:00 segment and our NFL segment. We'll talk about Cliff Kingsbury continuing to land gigs. We will talk about Joe Douglas, gives you a little information on Aaron Rodgers. Bills make a move. Will Levis will visit a team. We'll tell you who. We'll get into the top defensive tackle prospects. Speaking of Jalen Carter, we'll do that at 2:00 as well. We'll come back. A little Phillies offensive explosion. Don't go anywhere. Barrett Brooks, Derek Gunn, Rob Ellis hanging with you on this Tuesday. We are Sports Take, JAKIB Sports YouTube Network. I'm going to tell you about Jim Murray and Principal Financial Group because I want you to find the right person for your finances. You work way too hard. Your future is way too important, okay? And you want to be taken care of by the right person, the person who's looking out for your best interest. And that is Jim Murray and Principal Financial Group. Whether it's retirement planning, 401k review, insurance review, you have a small business, you're trying to get your employee benefits off the ground. If you're just not sure, if you're confused by something and you're looking to invest, he's a great resource to talk to. I know I've entrusted my IRA, my 401k rollovers to Jim, and I couldn't be any happier. You will be too. Give him a call, 610-996-4751, 610-996-4751. You can also email him, Murray, MURRAY, .jim@principal.com. That's Murray.jim@principal.com.